Good evening, everyone. We're at 6:34, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Manya Holland. I am the Education and Engagement Manager with the National Wildlife Federation. Tonight, we're going to be talking about bringing nature home through our Sacred Grounds Toledo program. And let me first, I just want to introduce to you the three of us who will be here presenting and answering questions for you this evening. Please note any questions you have, you can go ahead and enter into the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we will do our best to either answer them via the Q&A box. We will also take a couple of breaks throughout the evening to answer some of the questions as well. If we're not able to get to your question this evening, we will be sure to follow up with an email with the answers to your questions. And finally, let's see, sorry. So again, let me just introduce to you the three of us who are on tonight presenting. So again, my name is Manya Holland. I work out of the Great Lakes Regional Center for the National Wildlife Federation, which is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I have with me here as well Cindy Carnicom. Cindy is the co-owner of Poppin' Up Natives, and she will be talking to you this evening about how you can get started on creating your own native plant garden. Also here this evening is Marilyn Dufour. Marilyn is the vice chair of the Toledo-Lucas County Rain Garden Initiative, and she is on tonight to help us with Q&A. So you'll see her pop on a couple of times this evening to answer questions. So just quickly want to run through the agenda for tonight. So I will give you an overview of Toledo's Sacred Grounds Toledo and our efforts in Toledo and the National Wildlife Federation to give some context for this work in the project and sort of what we're doing as a team in the community. And then Cindy's going to present to you on planning, preparing, and planting your garden. So giving you those tools and tips that you'll need to get started. And then finally, we'll conclude by explaining to you how you can redeem your native plant voucher, how you'll receive it and can redeem it for native plants to get started on your own garden. So just brief introduction to the National Wildlife Federation. We're one of the oldest conservation organizations in the country. We've been around for more than 80 years, and our mission is to unite all Americans to ensure wildlife and people thrive in a rapidly changing world. We use a lot of different methods and avenues for carrying out our work. Policy and advocacy is a key part of our work. We also ensure that our efforts are science-based. We have quite a few scientists on staff. We do a lot of work around engaging communities, such as this webinar that we're doing this evening at the Sacred Grounds program. And then we also work in K-12 education. So as I mentioned, we're a national organization. We have 7 regional offices, and our headquarters is based in Reston, Virginia. I am based, again, out of our Great Lakes Regional Center, which is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And our office covers Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. We're called a federation because we actually have an affiliate organization in every state. Our affiliate organizations are typically other nonprofit organizations that share a similar mission, and so we work together with them as partners in a lot of our efforts. Again, this is our Great Lakes Center. We have about 25 staff that work in our center, and our 5 main program areas are water, restoration, education and habitat, wildlife, and climate resiliency. A lot of our work does focus around the Great Lakes themselves, but we also work in all of the areas surrounding the lakes. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our Sacred Grounds program. Sacred Grounds is a National Wildlife Federation program that recognizes congregations, houses of worship, and faith communities who both create wildlife habitat and actively link faith practices in caring for the environment. So the real goal of this work is not only creating healthier wildlife habitats and ecosystems, but also healthier people and communities. And so the effort tonight, usually we would be hosting these workshops. One of our participating houses of worship would usually be hosting these workshops. But of course, because of COVID, we are now having to shift everything virtually. And So we would normally be talking to you about sort of how the house of worship that's hosting the workshop got engaged with the program, what the program has meant for them, and sort of how they've created their own native plant garden. So in lieu of that, we do have a really nice, brief 5-minute video that I want to show you that features a number of our Toledo houses of worship, and will give you a nice sense of what the program is about, as well as how this workshop this evening fits into this broader effort. So just bear with me for a second here.
I was praying and I was asking the Lord, what was I supposed to be doing in this community? And the response that I got was, if you don't build up the community, you're not going to have a church.
Sacred Grounds by the National Wildlife Federation is a garden for wildlife program for faith communities, encouraging them to create habitat on their properties and educate their congregations and their communities about it.
This is Christ the King Church. We're a Catholic church in Northwest Detroit. The environmental aspect is to provide native pollinator habitat and habitat for all sorts of native critters. So pollinators, you think bees and butterflies and birds and things like that.
We came up with the vision to create a prayer park.
We are sitting right in the middle of a sacred ground space that we call our community prayer park. We filled out this application for these free flowers, unknowing that we were applying to Sacred Grounds. And that's how we were able to actually get our plants and get them planted.
So here's our plans for our labyrinth area. We've been working with National Wildlife Federation, but we'd like to do this in the fall and then hopefully in the spring rearrange these grasses and this area over here.
This is Meditation Missionary Baptist Church, and the Hope House is our community outreach project. What we're doing is we're clearing out up to this point, and we're gonna dig it out all the way down, probably 100 and 150 feet, and plant all of our flowers.
The idea is there's basic tenets. You have to reach beyond your faith community into the community at large and encourage them to participate in these best practices.
If we want to continue to exist in an environment that's good for us and healthy for humans, then we need to make it healthy for the other species that we share space with as well.
We're at the Islamic Center of Greater Toledo in Perrysburg, Ohio. There's a lot of milkweed in the area, which is a nice attractor for pollinators. So we do have a lot of bees, a lot of monarchs.
We're going to move these grasses around in more of like a semicircle. So, and then you come to the path and we'll have another bench or so, and you'll be able to sit here and relax.
This space is where we're going to be doing the Sacred Grounds project. The rain garden will be good because it'll gather the stormwater from our downspouts, and it'll also provide habitat for native pollinators.
Sacred Grounds have really stepped up to the plate and showed their commitment not just to nature, but to the community in providing the funding that is needed to complete this project.
I teach about a variety of things, but this is one of my favorite because it's so rare when your spiritual path, your academic interest, and your vocation collide. And that's exactly what Sacred Grounds is to me.
The whole planning structure of Sacred Grounds really helped to restore and to revitalize the ecosystem even around here. And so our prayer garden has really become that real focal point of caring about what God has put in our hands.
In Islam, the environment is an important part of the religion. God created this earth for us, and we're supposed to take care of it.
I had a lot of interconnections with other denominations, and it was great. It was very enlightening. You cross borders on faiths and religions, and it was very open and refreshing.
I'm just so thankful to the National Wildlife Federation. They had the thought to put faith communities in as a sector of our community that could touch lives. Because we do touch lives. I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to serve others.
The entry to the prayer park, those steps you walk up, it was the entryway into a drug house. I'm a retired police sergeant. I've frequented that house in my day of policing. When they finally boarded it up, that's when we moved in. So before, when I walked up those steps, it was a sense of rage, a sense of sadness, and now when I walk up those steps, it's a sense of peace, restoration, and hope.
I've had other people come ask me, how can I do this on my street? And so it's catching on. I realize that this thing is bigger than me.
I hope you enjoyed the video. I still get chills every time I watch that. It does a really nice job of representing, showing the work that we are doing in the Sacred Grounds program, and specifically in Toledo as well. So as you can see, and as I mentioned, this program is really about creating healthier habitats and healthier communities. So we're working to create a network of both people that have the skill sets and knowledge to install native plant habitats, and then also creating a network of these gardens and habitats themselves. And one of the first steps in the Sacred Grounds process, and something that you might think about on your own space, is visioning. So thinking about, what do you want your space to look like? How do you want to activate your space? You know, with the larger projects of the houses of worship, this can also apply to smaller projects at home as well, though. People consider, we'll be talking about this evening, installing a rain garden, natural playscapes, incorporating elements for kids to play in your yard, pollinator gardens, supporting pollinators, butterflies, bees, food garden as part of as a connection to your native plant garden, because native plants are really important because of the pollinators that they attract, in supporting food gardens as well. Maybe you want a quiet place for reflection. And this is less relevant for an individual space, but a community gathering space, or somewhere that is a focal point in your yard. So in the Great Lakes region, we actually launched the Sacred Grounds program in Toledo. So the Toledo Sacred Grounds Toledo team has really been pioneers in moving this program forward. The program's to the point now where it's actually launching nationally. So in Toledo, we'll have 20 houses of worship active in the program by the end of this year, as well as 80 residences. So folks like yourselves who are installing native plant gardens. Another place we're working is Grand Rapids. We will have 20 houses of worship there by next year, and 120 residents who are involved. And then in Detroit, you saw Detroit featured in the video as well, 20 houses of worship by next year too. And in addition, we're doing some large green stormwater infrastructure projects there that will be launching this next year at houses of worship, that will also be helping to reduce local flooding in Detroit, as well as helping to reduce people's water bills. And the water bills in Detroit, water rates has gotten very high, especially for some of the houses of worship. So that's a big issue there. And coming soon, we're planning to roll out the program in Cleveland, and as I mentioned, nationally. Here's just a picture of most of the Toledo Sacred Grounds team members. And these are the folks who we work together to help the houses of worship, providing technical support and helping them to go through the program and achieve their Sacred Grounds certification. And so you can see along the bottom of the screen all of the different organizations that are represented on this team. I mentioned, and you saw featured in the video, native plants. And so Cindy's going to talk a lot more about native plants tonight. That's the focus of her presentation. But I just want to point out that the reason that we focus on native plants when we're talking about creating healthier habitats and communities is that the native plants are really at the core of that. So all of these different benefits that you see here, improving water quality, beautification, providing for opportunities to connect with nature, which have been shown to have huge mental and physical health benefits for people, you know, kids and adults alike, really. These benefits really all stem from these native plants. The native plants will attract wildlife even in very urban settings. In relatively small gardens, they will attract amazing butterflies and other pollinators. And so providing really amazing opportunities for people to connect to nature really anywhere. So I just mentioned this, but even very small scale habitats or gardens make a huge difference. And I would say that's for both people and wildlife. You know, it really is kind of an if you build it, they will come situation, meaning that if you put in these plants, native plants, flowering native plants, which most of them are that we're going to be talking about tonight, you will see amazing butterflies and other critters will appear almost magically in your space. So as I said, the connection between this evening's program and our Sacred Grounds program is that this is part of our effort to really reach out to the broader community and help create this network of gardens and habitats and people who are interested in doing this work, such as yourselves. We focus on houses of worship as part of our work at National Wildlife Federation because they're really important anchors or hubs within communities. They are leaders, they can help be demonstration sites, disseminate information to people. And so, you know, we also similarly do a lot of work with schools for similar reasons, as well as the engagement with youth, which is of course very important. I just want to quickly point out a couple of resources that might be of interest. Doug Tallamy is an author who, and speaker, researcher. He does an amazing job of explaining to general public in a sort of non-overly scientific way why planting native plants is important, and also some of the steps that you can take in your own yard, which we'll be talking about tonight. But if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into this, I'd really recommend both his new book, and also he's got a previous book that Bringing Nature Home, that is another one that would be a great one to look at. I also just wanted to quickly highlight this Native Plant Finder, which is on National Wildlife Federation website. This is a feature where you can actually put in your zip code, enter your zip code, and you will get then a list of flowers and grasses that are native to your specific area, and it will provide also information about the butterfly and moth species and the plants that will attract those different species, how many species they'll attract, etc. So if that's something that's of interest to you and a primary goal, this isn't one way that you can sort of get information about what pollinators your plants might attract and which attract some of the most pollinators. Finally, we have a large network of certified habitats across the country. We have actually a self-certification program through National Wildlife Federation, where you can meet basic requirements. Essentially, if you install a native plant garden, you're going to meet the program's requirements. You can then, if you would like, you're actually eligible to receive a sign. Typically, those signs have to be purchased on our website, but for any of you who are participating in the workshop this evening and you move forward with planting a native plant garden, if you're interested in having one of these metal signs, as shown in the picture here, we would be happy to provide you with one of those at no cost. So I will be following up with you after the webinar, and if you're interested, you can provide your mailing address, and then we can get a sign to you. And sometimes people like to have these just to demonstrate you know, what they're doing on their space, why they're doing it, you know, just indicating the purpose of the garden, etc. So I will follow up with you on that. And with that, I'm going to pause and just see if we have any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to hand things over to Cindy, who's going to present to you more information about how you can get started with your garden. Marilyn, do we have any questions at this point?
Yeah, we only have one so far, and that is, will you be recording this session, and would you be willing to share the recording with attendees via email?
Yes, we are, and yes, we'll be happy to share it with you. That's great. Thank you. And thanks for your patience with the video. I'm sorry the sound was a little choppy initially, but I'm glad it worked. And at this point, I'll go ahead and hand things over to Cindy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy with Poppin' Up Natives, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about how you can plan and plant for your own garden. So if you're ready to go native, let's get started. So first off, planning begins with understanding your yard and the plants. So you'll hear us constantly asking when you're purchasing your plants, what kind of soil do you have? Do you have wet sand, or do you have dry clay, or what is the sun like? What are the growing habits you're looking for? And what kind of heights are you willing to accept? So a lot of the native plants are a lot taller. And so I get a lot of people that will come, I want something short. Well, short, I need you to be a little bit more specific. So these are the things that you want to keep in mind. So we're going to look at those a little bit more in depth. So soil. So these are the lovely words that we use in the horticulture industry of wet, dry, and mesic. And what does all that mean? So all of that really deters what kind of plant you get. So wet plants are used to being soggy and in wet soil all the time. And so they need certain types of soil, either clay and a lot of times we do have wet sands that will take some wet plants as well. And then you have the dry sands or the dry clays. And then mesic is the one that's in the middle. So that's the base of letting us know what are the best plants to fit in your yard. So most soils have a combination of all three of those characteristics. And so that loam is what is a combination of all three. And this is what typically happens when developers come in and create your brand new yard. They bring in topsoil, which is that loam. But what I'm really looking for with native plants is what is underneath that loam. So they'll typically put in 3 to 6 inches. So you need to go down a little bit deep to make sure what is your base. And typically in Northwest Ohio, it's one or the other. It's clay or sand. So how do you actually tell that? And it's simple. Once you get underneath that topsoil mix that was brought in, is dig out a little bit, get it a little bit wet, put it in your hand. And if it's soft and rolls up in a ball really easily, that is clay. If it's really silky, smooth to the touch, and it's soapy almost, and it will leave a lot of dirt on your hands, that's silty. And if it just breaks apart, it's sand. And if you have not quite sure, don't worry. Give us a nice dig down over 6 inches and bring us a sample in a baggie and we'll let you know. All right, don't worry if you don't want to deal with it. We can tell you. So the next part that we look at is watering. And why is that so soil influenced? Is because these plants, there are wet plants, and everybody loves cardinal flower, which is that lovely red flower in the middle. You'll notice that I have put names on the pictures of plants. Write down, if you can, which ones you kind of like, and then we can talk and let you know, oh, I really like world milkweed. Well, that's a little bit on the drier side. Or I really like cardinal flower. Can I choose a wet plant and water it more? You can. But remember, these are the things that we want you to not have as much maintenance, but you certainly can water those cardinal flower if you really, really want them. So what does all that watering really mean? It's determining how much water your soil holds. So native plants, their root systems are 3 times the size of the height. And so a native plant that's 5 foot tall, their root systems are going to be 15 feet. So this is just an example of 1 inch of water will go through 12 inches. That's not very far down, right? And clay soils will keep it all up on the top. It will stay very, very wet at the top and dry at the bottom. So it's really important when your new plants go in that you make sure that you water them for the first 3 years. It takes 3 years for perennials to develop. Anytime you're putting wet plants in dry soils, you'll have to water frequently. And during drought periods, even those with established gardens this year, we had to water them. It was just too dry. And remember, it takes a bit of water to make sure that you're getting down into that 3 times their height, depending on what size you put in. Oops. So there's a couple of different ways that you can decide that you want to go. You heard some of those in the video earlier. A rain garden, which helps with water purification and things, but they still also bring in a lot of your pollinators. The butterfly gardens, which are more drier, that help bring in pollinators. Maybe you want a prairie. Go for it. That's kind of what a prairie looks like. Or maybe you just want some containers for just because. You have lots of different ways that you can bring nature home. I'm clicking a little too fast today. Sorry. Double click. There we go. The next one is sunshine. So it's all about location. So when you're ready to know where you're going to put your new plants at, pay attention to where is it? Is it getting a lot of sun? And so a lot of people, there's some misunderstanding of what truly it means. So full sun is when you get 6 to 8 hours of sun. Part sun is when you get 4 to 6 hours of afternoon sun. Part shade is 2 to 4 hours of morning sun. And full shade is only when you get 2 hours of sun. And then the growing habits. So I would love to say that all native plants are nice and neat. That's not true. There are some plants that can be very aggressive, like obedient plant. It is anything but obedient. It grows by rhizomes and it can take over quickly. So it's one of those species that, although people with clay can say that they can keep it nice and neat without overtaking, if you put it in wet sand, I guarantee in a couple of years, all you'll have is obedient plant. Blue vervain is one of my favorites, but it's also very seedy. So if you don't want blue vervain taking over, you have to go in and make sure that you're deadheading it before it drops its seeds. Black-eyed Susans is a popular plant that we use in first plantings because it will bring color quickly, but it's actually only a biannual. So it won't flower the first year, it will flower the second year, and then it dies. Bergamot is another one of those aggressive native plants that will spread like crazy, but it's a popular one and everybody loves it. You just have to learn to tame it. So the more you know for your long-term success and taking care of your garden for the long term is worth a little bit of research and asking the right questions. So it's about, what do you really want? What are your goals? So think about, what is it you want to do? Are you wanting to bring in pollinators? Are you wanting to make sure that you're improving the water quality in your footprint? make sure that you're including all seasons if you're looking for pollinators, because it's not just springtime and summer that's important. Fall's very important too. They are less work, but no work is not true. And make sure that you have some information about what you want to do with seed. If you want it to take over and keep growing, then let the seed stay there and let nature take care of itself. And it will provide lots of habitat and items that birds need for nesting, etc. If you don't want anything to take off and you want it to stay prim and pretty, then you will have to do seed control by trimming them back before they go to seed. Heights are a typical question asked in native plants. A plant on the right can grow from 9 to 10 feet tall. It's a gorgeous Pseuphilium or a sunflower, but it is very, very tall. And what happens with these tall prairie plants is they will fall over without the right plants to hold them up, which is typically grasses. Like New England aster is a 3 to 5 foot tall, but without grasses to hold it up, the flowers are so heavy that they'll just fall over. Butterfly milkweed is your typical shorter plant, 2 to 3 feet. Nodding onion is probably the shortest one we have at 18 inches. But when you're putting it into your yard, the landscaping half rule, keep in mind, not that rules aren't worth breaking, but a lot of people are used to that. So if you're going to plant a 6 foot wide garden, you don't want to put anything over 3 feet in it. If you're putting it against a 6 foot tall fence and your plan is not to bury the fence, which is not a bad idea either, but so you would look at something a little bit half the size. So half the rule is the landscaping rule. I've been known to break them. You can see tall coreopsis on the side of my house. It's just something to keep in your head while you're thinking about what plants you're choosing and things that you do. So you're still not sure what kind of plants or what you want to do, don't worry. We do have you covered. Poppin' Up Natives has 2 easy growing designs to meet either dry or wet needs that are pre-designed for you for a 6 to 10 foot garden. And you can choose either a pollinator or rain garden, which are typically the easier to grow species. So you don't have a whole lot of horrible situations with them. Not saying they're not seedy, and there are some things in there, but they're easy to grow and you shouldn't have any problems getting them established. And new this year, we're doing a Sacred Grounds special at our open houses, which are coming up this weekend, this Sunday, and next Saturday, that you can pick your own starters, which are limited plugs, cones that you can get $16 or 16 plants for $50, which is a 26% off savings. But it is at our 2 open houses coming up. So when you're ready to start selecting your plants, you want to make sure that you put out what are your goals, what are you looking for, what's the size of the garden that you're going to put in, what kind of soil, what kind of sun, what are your height preferences, and a few plants that you like. And then you can reach out to Poppin' Up Natives, Robin, or myself, or even just shoot us an email at poppinupnatives@gmail.com, and we will help to make sure that your plants are the right for your yard. And it comes ready for planting. So the first thing, and especially if you're planning on planting something this fall, right now is the time to start looking at site preparation. And there's lots of options and things that you can do to make that happen. My favorite is solarization. which is kind of covering it up. You can use tarps or plastic, covering it up for 4 to 6 weeks. And that will kill down the grass and the upper seed bank. If you really are worried that you have a lot of weeds in the area, which I'll get to, then you want a little bit longer. Tilling is the common way that people do it, but as we have found that tilling is not always the best thing to do because you're bringing up even more seed that were underneath there. And the good old fashioned just plant it in where it is, dig a hole and plant it in and let it go through is sometimes not always easy, especially when you're learning native plants and when they're growing, because they start out really small before they get that large area in there. But you have lots of options to do that. Don't be afraid to ask us. And a lot of it depends on what you have. If you have a manicured lawn with no weeds, simply taking out the grass is easy. If it's a manicured lawn with just a few weeds, solarization quickly will happen. If you have a weedy infested area, you might want to look into some things like burnout, which is not a Roundup, but it's an organic chemical way. And if you're lucky enough to have a brand new build and you have bare soil, you're ready to go. You can plant right away. I'm sure not many of you have that, but it would be great if you all did. So once you get your plants and your yard is all ready to go, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your plants are acclimated to your conditions. So in the springtime, these plants are coming straight out of a greenhouse that's been 75 to 82 degrees, and they've been kept in prime humidity and sunlight for the most part because we control it with shade cloths. So you want to make sure that they are acclimated to where you're going to put them 1 to 2 weeks before you actually put them into ground. You don't want to, they will go into shock. And they can shut down if they are gone from one extreme to the next. Right now, the plants have been outside since June for the most part. They are pretty well outside, but they are kept in part sun. So if you have a sunny spot, you'll still want to make sure that they are acclimated before you do that. So they'll come in this lovely root bound that you'll see. You'll want to make sure that you disturb those roots. Don't worry, you're not hurting them. It is actually good for them because you need to disturb their root memory, and that will help them shoot through their roots down, and that's the most important, to make them get acclimated into the ground. Fall is typically what is said to be the best time to plant perennials, but spring is just as good. It's just during the summertime, it can be a little bit of a lot of water, but right now we're into the cool down season. Make sure that you water them in regularly the first season. Next year you can water a little less, and then the third year when it's kind of dry for a little bit, you'll have to water them more frequently than you would. And after that, it's just when we get into those long dry spells. Fertilization, a lot of people will tell you that native plants do not need fertilization. That's true after they're established. But while they're quickly putting a lot of energy into building those long root systems, make sure that you do give them a little bit of fertilizer. It doesn't take a lot, but they still need some because all of the nutrients that they're used to those large root systems to be able to get, they don't have yet. So choose a slow release like Osmocote and look for the lowest numbers you can possibly get. The high numbers out there, the 20, 10, 20s are not necessary. Just try to find something that's really small. And then there's the constant argument of mulch or no mulch. What I suggest is when you're planting your garden at first, put mulch down, and then once it's established, it will help you be able to determine what is your native plants and what is volunteers, what is being brought in from birds and wildlife that will all of a sudden be visiting your backyard more often than not. And then the mulch will disintegrate and then it's not necessary, but you certainly can use it if you want to make it a more manicured look. There are lots of resources out there. It's a great thing of more people jumping on board for the importance of including natives in our own backyard. And as Manya said earlier, the Native Plant Finder is a great tool to make sure that you're picking the right plants for your yard. Ohio DNR, Go Native, Ohio State University has some really good fact sheets on native plants. Oak Openings Wild Ones is a great resource. The Rain Garden Initiative has plans if you're interested in doing rain gardens, and all kinds of information on how big you need it, all those things. And always check us out on Facebook. We put our pop-up sales on Facebook and post different plants and different things, so check us out. All right, any questions for me, Marilyn?
Yes, indeed. We do have some questions. So,
awesome.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a question here that I think will go to Manya, and then we'll jump into the plant questions.
All right.
And I can start as well. Garrett asked, do you work with public schools? Sacred Grounds Toledo works primarily with faith communities, but we're basically a group of partners, and most of the partners do in fact work with public schools in different ways. The Rain Garden Initiative, we've helped schools put in demonstration rain gardens, and we've done presentations in classrooms, that kind of help. The Lucas County Soil and Water Conservation District has a full-time education director who does classroom programs, and also is wonderful for providing technical assistance with different kinds of agricultural projects and native plant gardens. Wild Ones, the local chapter, the Oak Openings Region chapter, does have a program called Seeds for Education to help people, schools do native plant gardens. And I'm gonna also turn it over to Manya to talk a little bit about what National Wildlife Federation does with public schools.
Yeah, thanks, Marilyn. So we do have a number of programs that are accessible on our website that are designed for K-12. We have an Eco Schools program that's actually international program that National Wildlife Federation administers for the US. And so you can take a look at that program, which is sort of helps guide teachers and students. It's really student-driven, place-based through sustainability projects on site at the school. We also have a number of free curriculum resources online, and particularly during COVID, there's free access to quite a number of our Ranger Rick resources. So we're the organization that publishes Ranger Rick magazine, as well as Ranger Rick Junior, Cub, and Zoo books. And so we have a number of resources available that are, again, currently free during COVID that folks can access, as well as some curriculum resources. And happy to follow up post-webinar with some links and more information. Thanks.
Great. Okay, and now the plant questions. Okay.
All right.
First question is the soil always consistent in the garden or neighborhood? Can I plant the same native plants that I see in my neighbor's yard?
So that's a really good question. And the love of the oak openings in this area, meaning I can stand with my foot in the sand in one area and my other foot in the clay in another area. So it's always smart to check your own. Chances are good, but it could be that you have a total different area, even 12 feet away. Unfortunately, sorry.
Okay, and how do you control plants that spread by roots or rhizomes?
So the way to do that is, there's several different ways that you can do that, like making sure that you have an edge that keeps them from that. But I will say at Olander Park, I had wild bergamot go probably 20 feet under a road to another garden. It does happen, but you can, the easiest way that to stop the rhizomes is when they start coming up in the early spring is to cut them out and make sure that you get down deep to get them, to stop them from spreading. Making sure that you're keeping your seed down because they'll grow both ways. It's not an easy one to control, and it takes work. It does. I'm sorry. Good questions, though.
Yeah. And my friend Liz, hi Liz, would like to know what kind of plants, native plants, should you use to attract hummingbirds, and what kinds work in a shade garden?
So hummingbirds like the tubular plants. And we're trying to work on growing more of the shade plants. We're getting there, but like tall bellflower is a good one for that, but I don't carry it. Cardinal flower is always the one that everybody likes. It is a hummingbird attractor big time. So is blue lobelia. And blue lobelia will take some shade. Monkey flower will do shade well. That will attract hummingbirds. They like the tubular flowers.
Very good. And from the chat, where is Poppin' Up Natives Nursery?
So we're all over the place. Our main greenhouse is in Berkey, Ohio. And that's where our open house is this weekend and next weekend. We will be out at the Berkey greenhouse. We use other greenhouses as well, and you can also find lots in my backyard. There's probably about 6,000 plants in my backyard right now.
Okay. What do you recommend for an existing native garden that's gotten very weedy and we can't keep up?
So that's a loaded question because I don't know what weeds you have. So sometimes letting nature take care of nature is always a good thing. And where if you just not remove the seed heads, and eventually nature will find its balance. It's one of the things that does happen. And a lot of people like to fight that. And I get that. And it does take some work to weed and do those things. But a lot of times I think what people leave out when they're just putting forbs in is those grasses for support, and it can help keep some of that weed out too. My opinion, there are certainly things that will take up more room that could be another option to kind of attack some of that. But it really depends on your soil type and what kind of weeds you're having issues with. Like a lot of times, unfortunately, the birds will bring in thistle, which is a constant thing that happens. And it is just what nature it does. It's one of those things.
Okay. And Nancy asks, do you have any recommendations for getting Canadian thistle out of a perennial garden. She's tried cutting with scissors, not digging them out, using straight vinegar on them.
Yeah, and that's thistle is probably one of the hardest things because birds will bring in thistle, and thistle is quick to take over. And I don't normally, but if you start having a really bad thistle problem, I do suggest what we call the glove of death, and talk to me. I'll tell you about it. I'm not going to publicly say that, but it is a way. I've heard people use like salt and vinegar together in a mix so that you have an acid base kind of thing. I haven't typically tried that one myself. I guess because I know what happens, and so I attack thistle pretty harshly, personally.
It's hard not to, it's easier to do some of these things in retrospect, but one of the things I wish I had known before I put in a garden was the whole idea of solarization that Cindy talked about. Mm-hmm. If you're working with a yard that's weedy to begin with, it really, really helps to use plastic and moisture to kill those weed seeds before you plant.
Yeah.
And so it's a time-consuming process. It can take, up to 8 weeks with the right heat to kill them. But if you plan out far enough, I think in the long run, it'll be worth it. I say this because I have a pollinator garden where I've kept up, but it hasn't been easy because of the bindweed. And I wish I had dealt with it before I planted my natives, So, for those of you who haven't planted yet, take your time to try to get rid of those seeds before you plant your native plants, and it will save you so much work in the long run. So, so a couple of people have asked, is it possible to have help selecting a site on my garden or a spot for a garden? I suspect that Wild Ones might have some folks who would be willing to help with that because their focus is native plant landscaping. And I do know that the Rain Garden Initiative does that. If you're thinking about doing a rain garden, we have always done, but are trying to get our act together a little better to make it easier to get somebody out to your yard. But we'll come out and walk your yard with you and make some suggestions as to where would be a good spot for it. So, that would, so I would say yes. And Cindy, I will put a slide up in a minute that will show you those websites again that Cindy for the Rain Garden Initiative. We're in the process of trying to move our contacts online so that you can kind of fill out an online form to let us know, and then we can work with it from there, or you can also call us. So I will share that information. And the Wild Ones website, Cindy already mentioned, but I'll show you that again as well. So yes, we can help you. I don't know this answer. So Cindy, do you know the scientific name of monkey flower?
Well, and the other thing.
Oh,
yes, it is Minumus ringulus. I think I'm saying that right. I teach biology and I am horrible at Latin. Go figure.
Okay, are there some goldenrods that should stay and some that should go?
So there are Canadian goldenrods that can be really, really aggressive. And there are goldenrods that are a little less aggressive. And and it just kind of depends on your desires. And a lot of people think that goldenrods are the ones that they're allergic to, and it's actually ragweed because they both come at the same time. Although there are a few people that truly do have goldenrod allergies, it's not normally as high as most people think. It's just Canadian can be aggressive and take over. It's, again, it's choices and thinking about those desires before you plant. And I would like to say, for the person that wanted to know about how to select a spot, I think it really comes down to, when you're doing that, is what your overall goal is. So if you're looking for the difference of that I just want a rain garden, or I'm looking for a pollinator garden, or I want something very showy and colorful, that can help you decide as well location for whether you want something in part shade or full sun. Most natives will go part shade anyways, so you might want to keep that in consideration. Any other questions I missed?
Okay, no, it looks like we've answered all the questions so far. So let me see if I can share a couple slides with you.
Yep, I'll stop sharing so you can.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So couple of the resources that Cindy already shared with you is the Rain Garden Initiative website, which has all kinds of information about putting in a rain garden, but is also the home for our Sacred Grounds Toledo webpage. And on that webpage, you can find a variety of resources, including the video that you saw tonight. You can see it in full speed. And a link to the National Wildlife Federation site so that you can learn more about the requirements of the Sacred Grounds program. But at the bottom, we've also started to collect resources to help people with their native plant gardens. So one of the things that we put together is a pollinator template for rain gardens and for drier pollinator gardens, with some suggestions of how you might organize the plants and what plants you might pick for different conditions, including some for part shade. So it's always kind of a grand experiment because these plants will kind of go where it's optimum for them. But our templates are designed to kind of make a small garden with a little bit of symmetry that might be palatable to the neighbors, and who might not be used to the more prairie kind of style of native plant gardening. So that is on our Sacred Ground webpage and might be helpful for you for planning your garden. It includes a grid and some ideas about some coloring things that you can do to figure out what's going to bloom when during the season, so you make sure you have flowers that are blooming all through the season. And then also we keep a list on there of native plant sources. Poppin' Up Natives is of course one of them, but it lists a lot of the places that have plant sales in the spring. A lot of those were canceled this year, but we hope will be available next spring. And there are a couple of small commercial nurseries in the area that sell a small selection of native plants. They're not exclusively native, but they are growing from local seed sources. So that would be another place you might find some native plants. If you're not an online kind of person, for the Rain Garden Initiative, the two partners that field most of the phone calls are the Lucas Soil and Water Conservation District. They also sell rain barrels on site and compost bins and other things that are really great for gardening. And the Toledo Division of Environmental Services, which is where I work. And that is where you would call if you're thinking about doing a rain garden and you would like somebody to come out and look at your yard. So The Soil and Water Conservation District also has people that do that. So either one of those numbers. And then of course, if you have general gardening questions, there's few resources as wonderful as OSU's Extension Horticultural Hotline. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they have master gardeners on the phone who can answer your question. And if they don't know the answer, they go to Ohio State University and find you an expert. So that's really helpful. And finally, Cindy also gave you the Wild Ones Openings website. This is a great place to educate yourself. Right now, we're not doing a lot of in-person programs, as you know, but in times when we can, they do monthly programs that are open to the public, and most of them focus on native plant gardening. So it's a great place to learn more. And I did mention they have the Seeds to Education program for schools as well. So another place where you can learn a little bit about native plant gardens and pollinators are, oops, if it's gonna go back, sorry. TMACOG, the Toledo Metropolitan Area Council on Governments, is administering for its partner municipalities a public education campaign called Clear Choices Clean Water. In this case, Toledo Lake Erie Clear Choices Clean Water. And on this website, there's a lot of information on native plants and gardens and pollinators and pesticides and things that are related to that in terms of helping us maintain our water quality. The reason I have put this one up in particular, though, is to offer a way that you can actually help us. We're very, very excited that all of you have come to learn how to work with native plants in your own yard and interested in creating or expanding native plant gardens. But we know they're out there, but we don't know where, we don't know how many, and it's kind of a hard thing to track and keep track of. So we would ask you if you would consider doing one or both of these two things. One of the pledges, the way the Toledo Lake Erie Clear Choices Clean Water website works, in addition to providing a lot of background information on what you personally can do to help protect our water quality, is give you an opportunity to pledge that you're going to do one of these things. And of course, you are definitely going to be planting some natives. So you've already got the pledge in the works, you know. So if you go to this website and you pledge to plant natives, it's going to ask you some information about how much area and about, you know, a little bit about your yard and what and your plans. But it anonymously lets us know that we have a garden going in and about how much area, and also if you do provide an email address, you know, it'll remind you of your pledge or whatever, but we don't send out regular updates or anything like that. And then it'll map it. So you will be able to see all of the native plant gardens of the people who have pledged to do that, which is kind of neat. The other thing that you could do, which would help us see these native plant gardens going in the ground, is post a picture of your native plant garden on social media, if you do social media, and tag us at no space Sacred Grounds Toledo, and obviously you can space between the words, and we'll be able to see your pictures and know that these gardens are actually going in the ground. So we would definitely appreciate that help if you're willing to do that.
Perfect. I don't see any more questions for now. Let's just give it another minute, but this is the end of our programming, I think, for the evening. So please jump in with any additional questions you have before we say goodbye for the evening. And just want to, again, thank everyone for participating tonight. We really appreciate it and are so happy to have more folks interested in planting native plants and contributing to the health of ecosystems in the community. And so please be in touch with any questions you might have. We're here to help. Looks like we might have another, lots of lovely thank yous coming in, which is very nice. I don't see any additional questions at this point. There's one question here, Cindy. Any ideas how to remove invasive honeysuckle from my yard? It has taken over.
Dig, 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 dig. It is one of those. It's the only way. Sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
There is a tool that can be used also, especially when they're small, to just pop them out. And I don't know what the name of that tool is, but I know that Hal Mann of Wild Ones has used one. If you know him or can catch up with him at a meeting. But yeah, the other thing in terms of control, the Green Ribbon Initiative might be able to offer some suggestions for removal of honeysuckle. They do a lot of that work.
It's the honeysuckle popper, huh?
That's a great name.
Honeysuckle popper. It's the best I can do.
I know everybody looks for the quick one, but take it from someone who's been in restoration and conservation for many years. Dig. Dig, dig, dig.
Honeysuckle popper. Okay.
That's funny though.
Thank you,
I
Nancy.
like that name.
That's great.
Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to meeting you soon.
Yes, thank you all for bearing with us with the virtual format. Take care, stay safe, everyone. Have a good evening.